So guys, what if I told you you could have a lifetime supply of yogurt and never have to buy it again? And it is so easy to do this, you're not going to believe it. I call it the eternal yogurt hack, and it really does work. It's really simple to do, so follow along. In just a matter of minutes, you'll completely understand how this works. Now, the first thing we need to do is pour up 4.5 cups of whole milk. Now, you can use skim milk, so it depends on how thick you like your yogurt. If you want your yogurt to be on the thick side, use whole milk. If you like it a little bit more on the thin side, then you can use skim milk. But if you want it super thick, you can add just a couple of tablespoons of powdered whole milk to the existing milk that's already whole, but it'll make it even thicker and richer and even creamier. Now, the next thing you're going to need is just plain ordinary yogurt, depending on what brand you like. So you just have to remember that the future batches you're making here are going to have similar characteristics to your initial yogurt. So when you buy this, you want to look on the container and make sure it says live active cultures. Without that, you're not going to have a successful yogurt trial here. So remember, plain yogurt, and make sure it says that on the label. Now, some people are going to tell you to order a powdered culture starter online, and there's really no point in doing that because you can start with any yogurt you get from the store. You just want to make sure that it goes back to what I just mentioned, the live active cultures. It just adds a little bit more complexity if you start with a powdered culture. So just remember, any grocery store, almost every convenience store are going to have some type of yogurt. But remember, we just want to use plain to begin with on our starter culture. So a few other things you're going to need. You're going to need a saucepan, a whisk, and a digital probe type thermometer to make sure that you get the milk just to the right temperature. You can do it on the wrist trick, and if you're really good at making baby bottles, you may be able to tell, but there's just a precise temperature we need to reach so we don't kill the cultures and don't overheat the milk. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pour our 4.5 cups of milk into our saucepan. And a critical thing to do here, a critical thing to remember is make sure everything you're using, from whisk to measuring cups to your saucepan, everything needs to be sterile because you are dealing with a bacteria that's going to grow in this formula. So if something is off like that and it's not sterilized, it may completely fail and your yogurt may not make. Now, at this point, you can add the powdered milk, but I would say go ahead and do your first batch without it, anywhere from 2 tablespoons up to half a cup to 4.5 cups. But I would recommend just doing it without the first time and see how you like the consistency of the yogurt. But if you like it extra thick in future batches, you can do that. So this particular stove is a gas stove. You can use electric, but what we want to do, we want to boil this over, and not a heavy boil, just a very, very light boil. We want to do this for about 5 minutes. But if you like this type of stove, and the reason I'm using this is because the lighting is a little bit better on my island here. So I'll put a link in the description if you're interested in one of these stoves. I actually had to order it from Korea, but now they're available on Amazon. So one of the keys is we don't want to scorch our milk, so we're going to slowly stir it until it reaches that temperature of about 180 degrees, and that's where our digital thermometer comes in. Just make sure that you closely monitor it because we don't want to overheat the milk. Now, as I said, you can do this for 5 minutes. If you want the yogurt to be a little bit thicker, then go up to 10 minutes for a little bit thicker type of yogurt. Now I'm trying to be extra careful and continue to stir. I don't want it to scorch or burn on the bottom. And we're right around 181, so we need to cut our heat down just a little bit. So just remember, we're trying to keep it at that 180 level for about 5 minutes. Now this process actually kills undesirable bacteria, and it also denatures the milk proteins so that they set into like a smooth gel. So just make sure you continue to stir and just watch the clock for about 5 minutes for standard yogurt and up to 10 minutes for thicker yogurt. So a word of caution is you don't want this to boil, and it's okay if you do see small bubbles around the edges of your pan. If you're stirring consistently, that's pretty normal, so don't worry about that. Again, we don't want this scorching on the bottom, so I'm just going to continue to stir. All right, so we've held it at that temperature for roughly 5 to 6 minutes, and I don't like my yogurt super thick, so we're going to take this off the heat and set it to the side. We want to cool this down to roughly about 110 degrees. We don't want this to be too hot, because if it is too hot, if it's above, I believe, 120, it's going to kill your bacteria. If it's below 110, it may be a slow fermentation process. So that sweet spot is about 110 degrees. Now you can cool the milk slightly in a cool water bath or an ice bath. We're going to fill this up and add a little bit of ice to it and just cool it down just a little bit so we can get it to that perfect temperature. Now I'm hoping you can read the thermometer there, but we're cooling it down. We went from about 180, we're about 146. And the ice bath, the cool water bath, is slowly lowering the temperature. We just want to watch it very closely because we don't want it to get below 110. We want that perfect sweet spot for the bacteria to grow in. Okay, we're roughly around 120, so I don't want it to get too low too quickly, so I'm going to take it out, set it back on the counter, and then we're going to go on to the next step. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to take about 1/2 cup of our cooled milk and put it into a separate glass bowl. Then we're going to take 2 tablespoons of any yogurt, whatever preference you have, and we're going to whisk that once we put that in there. So let's put in 2 tablespoons. And now the next thing we want to do is we want to whisk this until it becomes evenly distributed in our cooled milk. And this is the inoculation process. Now one tip about whisking this, so we don't want to introduce too much oxygen, so just do a nice slow whisk until the yogurt is completely dissolved in our milk. Okay, so let's check our pan and see what our temperature is. We were currently at 111 just a second ago when I checked. There's 111. So we're right at 111.6. So 110 to 115 is fine. So let's pour our milk back into the saucepan, and then we're going to whisk for a few more minutes. We want to do this slowly. We don't want to introduce too much oxygen, just a nice slow stir to mix the inoculated milk back into the entire amount of yogurt. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to transfer the inoculated milk into a very clean glass container, preferably one that you can have a lid to. So this type of glass container that comes with a plastic lid is perfect for what we need, so it's not going to be contaminated and it can retain its heat. There's another trick we need to do. We need to make sure we put this somewhere where the temperature will stay pretty stable over a period of the next 6 to 12 hours. 6 hours being your minimum time, and up to 12 hours if you want extra strong and extra tart yogurt. Now I'm going to put this in my stove, and it's still warm, but I want to wrap it with a towel to make sure it retains the maximum amount of heat. And so we're just going to wrap this. Make sure you don't accidentally turn your stove on, because then you'll have a flame going from this towel. So again, we're going to wrap it carefully and then place it into the stove. I'm going to go with 6 hours, and we'll pull it out and take a look at it. Now I strongly recommend setting a timer so you don't go beyond the time that you're going to do this inoculation process, because it may become too tart for you or too thick. So a timer is the best way to do this, and you can experiment with times anywhere from between 6 and 12 hours depending on your personal taste in the yogurt. Also, you want to make sure that you put a post-it note in your oven controls to make sure no one accidentally turns it on to preheat it for something else. Now we've had it in here for a solid 6 hours, so we're going to remove it. And one tip is you want to make sure that you don't move this while it's in there, because it can interfere with a kind of a settling process. So just make sure that you let it remain perfectly still the whole 6 hours. All right, so let's take it out, and once it's set after that 6 hours, it should jiggle similar to custard or like Jello. So you can see, I don't know if you can tell that from me shaking it, but there's kind of a jiggliness to it, and it is pretty solid. So next thing you're going to want to do is put it in the fridge for about 2 to 3 hours. But if you like Greek yogurt, I'll show you how to make it extra thick and firm, and that's what some people like, so I'll show you exactly how to do it. Now one more thing before you put it in the fridge, you want to do a taste test. You want to make sure that if it's your particular variety of tartness that you like, then you're good. But if not, you can wrap it back up and put it back into the oven. So let's do a taste test. And it tastes exactly like the original yogurt, maybe just a little bit more tart, but it's just the way I like it. Now if you're happy with the consistency of the taste, you can just put it in the refrigerator, let it cool for about 2 to 3 hours. It will It will be okay to eat it for up to 10 days, but after that, you need to start over with a new batch. And you can continually do this where you'll have an endless supply of yogurt, just having a couple tablespoons set aside so you don't eat it all. You can keep doing this process over and over and never have to buy yogurt again. Now let me show you how to turn this into Greek style yogurt. Now you're going to need a couple of things. One, a strainer and some cheesecloth. I just opened this. This is freshly opened, so I'm going to run it under water and rinse it and then wring it out. Make sure your cheesecloth is clean and dry. So you may need to do that a few times, and you may need to set it on the counter and allow it to dry naturally just to make sure it's perfectly dry when you do this process. So we have our outer collection bowl, our strainer, and then we're going to place cheesecloth on the inside of this. Make sure it covers all areas there. I've allowed it to dry. And now we're going to move on to turning our standard yogurt into a Greek style yogurt. So I'm going to use half of this to make our Greek style yogurt. So we're going to take that, we're going to scoop it out, and I want to show you how thick it already is. It's fairly thick, but there's still moisture in it. So we just want to put that, and this is going to take about 6 hours to completely strain. So you can set this aside and cover it with a towel and just allow it to drain any moisture out. And then that way you will have some of the thickest, creamiest yogurt you can imagine. Now after doing this straining process, your yogurt will be higher in protein. And again, like I said, it will be much, much thicker. So just depending on your personal preference, you can do this or not do this. This is ready to go. Just allow it to chill a little while in the fridge before you eat it. Now it's been sitting in our cheesecloth just for about 5 to 6 minutes. And I want to show you how much moisture we've already extracted out. And hopefully I can do this without making a mess, but you can see there's quite a bit of moisture already coming out of it. So after 6 hours, you will truly have some of the thickest, creamiest Greek yogurt you can imagine. And it has no additives and no artificial anything in it because you made it yourself. So if you want to add to the sweetness or the creaminess of it, you can add whipping cream. You can also add honey, and you can do this to your own personal preference, or maple syrup. So just depending on how sweet or how extra creamy you like it, those are 3 additives. But one important thing to remember is you want to do this after it's set, not before the post-inoculation and not before the 6 hours in the stove. You want to wait till it's removed from the stove after the 6 hours. Now one of my favorite ways to eat yogurt is the one that has the fruit on the bottom and granola added. It's one of the best things I've ever had for breakfast. So we're going to wash and clean our strawberries, cut the tops off, and we're going to puree them, and then we'll put them into our container. Now I wanted to give you a glance at all the jars that we saved that we reuse for yogurt. So we just put this in our cabinet, and anytime we need to make yogurt, we can make multiple jars. And this is a great way to do it because then you have a nice glass jar that you can eat directly out of. Is a great snack or a dessert. So that is my favorite way to do it there. You have fruit on the bottom, you have some granola and just a little bit of honey on top to add a little bit of sweetness to it. And so it's super easy to do, and you'll just have a never-ending supply of yogurt. One important tip to remember is make sure that everything is washed in the dishwater, or you've put boiling water on everything. Dishwasher is what I meant to say. You want to make sure that it's extremely hot water so everything is sterilized, so that you don't want to have any unnecessary or unwanted bacterial growth in your yogurt. So guys, you really can have a lifetime supply of yogurt. Once you get the initial batch, you can repeat this over and over. You'll just set some aside each time you make it. And it's just a great way to make it. You know it's organic, you know exactly what's in it, you know there's no artificial anything in it because you put it together yourself. So it's really easy, and it's a fun little thing to do with kids. So if you have kids around the house, make some yogurt with them and they'll be stunned, and get them to eating something that's healthier than some of the really nasty stuff that you can get at the grocery store that you don't want them eating. So guys, if you have a question about this video or any previous video, I hope you'll become a public subscriber first. I always put those questions and comments to the front of the line because I get anywhere from 100 to 300 comments a day, and it's hard to answer anybody. So anyways, if you want to help the channel, you can become a patron. The link is in the description, and I usually put added things in there like how to make anything from A to Z, gardening or some type of added mechanical device. I'm always doing things like that. And I'll probably put something in the Patreon also for yogurt, maybe something a little bit extra. So guys, I really appreciate you watching, and have a great day.